You thought it was finally happening, not a fantasy, not the kind of hope you have learned to be suspicious of after everything this journey has put you through. Something that felt different from the inside. Something that had weight and texture and the particular quality of things that are actually real. He reached out, or the timing converged, or something in the space between you cracked open in a way it had not cracked open in months. And for a window of time that you could probably measure in hours, maybe days, it felt like the version of the story you had been quietly holding in the back of everything was about to finally begin. And then it did not. The door opened. You both stood at the threshold. And then something, you are still not entirely sure what, pulled one of you back. Maybe him? Maybe the circumstances. Maybe something that is much harder to name and even harder to accept, which is the possibility that neither of you was actually ready, even though every part of you was certain you were. The door closed, not with a slam, with a quiet click. And you have been sitting with the echo of that click ever since, in the particular silence that follows something that was very nearly something else. This is one of the most specific kinds of pain this journey produces. Not the pain of separation, which you have learned to metabolize over months of practice. Not the pain of silence, which you have learned to move around and build a life alongside. This is the pain of almost. The pain of proximity without arrival. The pain of being close enough to touch something and then watching it recede. And the particular cruelty of it is that the almost makes the distance feel larger than it did before it happened. Because before the almost, the reunion was a future event. After the almost, it becomes something that has already partially occurred and then been taken back. You are probably running two tracks right now. The track that understands, spiritually, that there is a reason, that timing is real, that the universe does not bring something close and then withdraw it arbitrarily, and the track that does not care about any of that right now. The track that is just sitting with the specific grief of a door that opened and then closed, and does not want to be given a framework for it, it just wants to be seen in it. Both of those tracks are correct, and this video is going to hold both of them. If you have lived through a near miss with him, if the door opened and then closed before you could walk through it, if you are sitting inside the grief of something that did not quite happen, leave a like and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Drop the words, "I understand the almost" in the comments, because what you are carrying right now is one of the most misunderstood experiences on this journey, and understanding it is going to change what it means. Before we go any further, I want to put something directly in front of you. I am offering personal readings, because if you are at the place this video is describing, you are not in the middle of the journey anymore. You are close. Close enough that the almost happened. Close enough that the door existed at all. And that proximity is not random. It is the result of something that has been building in you and in him for longer than either of you realizes. And that proximity deserves more than general content can give you. A twin flame union personal reading exists for exactly this moment, not a sun sign forecast, not guidance written for a general audience. This is a reading built from the precise architecture of your specific connection, using your birth chart as its foundation. Your name, your date of birth, your exact time of birth, your place of birth. From those coordinates, what arrives in your inbox is a personal audio reading and a detailed written report. What the universe is currently orchestrating in the space between you, right now, in this specific phase, where you actually are in your journey, not where you feel like you are, but where the stars say the energy is sitting and what it is preparing. What karmic patterns have been running beneath the surface of every near miss and every silence. What your soul contract with him actually says about this phase you are in. What the next stage looks like and what it is asking of you specifically. This is not a general map, it is your map. If you have been inside and almost, and you need to understand what it means for your actual journey, the link is in the description below. Your reading will be delivered to your inbox within 48 hours. Here is what the sky is doing on April 28th. Venus is forming a trine with Pluto today. That aspect is exact and active right now. And what a Venus-Pluto trine does in its most essential expression is intensify whatever has been present beneath the surface of connection. It does not generate feeling from nothing. It amplifies what has been circling underneath ordinary moments. It draws depth that has been held at a manageable distance into the foreground, and it makes suppression temporarily unavailable. You feel more right now, and so does he. For twin flames in any stage of separation, a Venus-Pluto transit is often the energetic condition under which near misses occur, because both people are momentarily closer to what is real in them. The armor is thinner, the pull is louder. The threshold becomes visible, and both people approach it in a way that they can usually avoid when the sky is quieter. But Pluto's involvement also means that what rises to the surface is not only beauty and longing, it is everything that is unresolved, everything that is unhealed, everything that would need to transform before the connection can hold what both people feel when the depth is this close. The door opens under Venus-Pluto. And Pluto also shows you, with complete clarity, what is still standing in the doorway. That is what you walked into. Not a mistake, not a false start. An initiation that showed you exactly where the growth still needs to happen. The moon moved into Libra this morning. Libra is the sign of relationship and balance, of what is asked of us when we are willing to meet someone at the threshold. The Libra moon is pulling you toward fairness, toward seeing both sides of what happened, toward the willingness to understand his experience as real and valid, even when it produced an outcome that hurt you. That is not a small ask, but it is the ask of this particular sky. There is a body of research in psychology built entirely around what happens to people after experiences that break open the structures they were living inside. Not the rupture itself, but what emerges on the other side of it. The researchers who built this framework, Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, called it post-traumatic growth. In what they found across thousands of people who had lived through experiences that fundamentally altered their sense of what was safe and what was possible, is that the most significant growth does not follow gradual, comfortable progress. It follows structural rupture. Specifically, it follows the kind of rupture that dismantles an existing belief structure so completely that the person cannot simply repair it. They have to build something new in its place. And in that necessity, in that forced reconstruction, capacities emerge that would never have emerged through incremental improvement. Depths of resilience, clarity about what actually matters, a relationship to the self that is more accurate and less conditional. Things that could only be accessed through loss, understandings that could only arrive after the familiar structure was gone. The almost reunion is this kind of rupture, not because it was traumatic in the most acute clinical sense, but because it was structurally devastating to a specific belief you were carrying, the belief that the moment of convergence would be enough. That if the timing came together and both of you were present and the door appeared, you would both walk through it. They almost dismantled that belief. And in dismantling it, it removed something you were leaning on that was, without your knowing it, making it harder to build something more solid. That is not a consolation offered from a safe distance. That is a description of mechanism. Tedeschi and Calhoun identified 5 specific domains in which post-traumatic growth shows up most reliably. Personal strength is the first. Relating to others is the second. New possibilities is the third. Appreciation of life is the fourth, and spiritual change is the fifth. The almost reunion, if you move through it rather than around it, touches all 5. But it enters through spiritual change first. Through the forced revision of the story you were telling about how this connection works, about what the universe is doing, about what reunion actually requires from both of you. Tedeschi and Calhoun make an important distinction between 2 kinds of response to rupture. The first is resilience, which means returning to the baseline you had before the rupture occurred, recovering previous function, arriving back at where you started. The second is growth, which means arriving somewhere you could not have reached without the experience of the rupture itself. A new baseline that is higher and different, and that could not have been built any other way. The almost reunion is not asking you for resilience. It is not asking you to recover your previous level of hope or patience or spiritual equilibrium to bounce back to the version of you who is simply waiting for the door to appear. It is asking for growth. It is asking you to arrive at something you could not have arrived at without the experience of the door opening and closing while you were watching. And here is what the almost revealed, whether it felt like revelation at the time or simply like more pain. It showed you what you actually do when something you have been wanting for a very long time becomes momentarily available. It showed you how your nervous system responds at the threshold. It showed you what happens to your sense of self when reunion becomes concrete rather than hypothetical, when it moves from the imagination into the present tense. And what it showed, in most cases, is that the version of you who has been waiting for reunion is not quite the same as the version of you who can sustain it once it arrives. There is a gap, not a vast one, but a real one. And the almost reunion is what makes that gap visible. That is not evidence that you are not ready. It is a precise description of what you are in the process of becoming. The divine masculine in a twin flame separation often does not experience the almost reunion as almost. He experiences it as crisis. And those are not the same thing. This is not because he feels less. It is because of the specific relationship between avoidant attachment patterns and the experience of proximity. Attachment theory, which grew from the foundational research of John Bowlby and was extended through decades of work by researchers like Mary Ainsworth, distinguishes between different attachment orientations not in terms of the depth of feeling each person carries, because depth of feeling exists across all patterns, but in terms of what closeness itself triggers neurologically. For someone organized around an anxious attachment pattern, closeness is regulating. It brings the nervous system down. It is associated with safety and relief. For someone organized around an avoidant attachment pattern, closeness is activating. It brings the nervous system up. It triggers the threat response, not because closeness is dangerous, but because closeness has been stored from very early and pre-verbal experiences as the condition that precedes loss. The avoidant person did not learn to withdraw because they are cold or indifferent. They learned to withdraw because withdrawal was the only protective strategy available to them when the attachment figure was unavailable, or overwhelming, or inconsistent. Withdraw before you can be withdrawn from. Create distance before it can be created for you. That pattern is neurological now. It runs before conscious decision. When the divine masculine approached the threshold with you and then stepped back, what was happening was not a deliberate choice to close the door. His nervous system, specifically the subcortical threat response system operating below conscious awareness, registered closeness and fired the protective withdrawal before his conscious mind had any meaningful say in it. The door closed not because he decided to close it. It closed because a very old and very automatic system did what it was built to do. And here's what changes when you understand that. His retreat from the threshold tells you exactly what the next stage of his internal work is. Not yours. His. The question he is now carrying, whether he knows it or not, is whether he can interrupt the automatic withdrawal the next time the threshold appears. Whether he can stay present in closeness for long enough that his nervous system begins to revise the old association. That is deep work. It is slow work. But it is the work that the almost reunion just made visible and necessary. If you have been inside this journey for more than a few months, you already know that the experiences blur together over time. The dates of things, the sequences, what came before and what came after, and how you actually felt in the days following a difficult moment versus the weeks following. The grief of the almost reunion is real and immediate right now, but so is the growth that will come from it. And most people cannot accurately see how far they have traveled from one difficult experience to the next, because the emotional intensity of the current moment makes earlier moments feel smaller than they were, and growth invisible from inside the week it is happening in. This is exactly the gap that the Twin Flame Journey Tracker and Progress Workbook closes. 39 pages, built around the 8 stages of the Twin Flame Journey, with a monthly stage tracker so you can see your actual movement, Not just your hope or your fear, but the observable evidence of where you are now versus where you were 6 weeks ago. A synchronicity log so the signs do not disappear into the blur of months. A daily self-love checklist that keeps you at the center of your own story rather than organized entirely around his timeline and his movement. Weekly reflection prompts that help you identify the patterns you would miss if you were only living inside the emotional current without ever stepping back to see it. Monthly reviews that let you see in writing that you are not spinning in circles. That movement is happening even when it is invisible from inside a single difficult week. The almost reunion is a data point. And data points are only meaningful when you can place them inside a visible sequence and see what they are part of. The link is below. At $17, this is the documentation system for the most significant journey of your life. In twin flame frameworks, and in the broader spiritual traditions that inform them, the concept of divine timing is frequently used in a way that functions as comfort rather than as explanation, as if it simply means the reunion will come eventually, just not yet, and there is something to trust about the delay even if you cannot see why. That framing, while not wrong, is softer than what is actually being communicated. It misses the mechanism. Divine timing is not a schedule. It is a structural requirement. The universe does not withhold reunion to be mysterious or to test patience for its own sake. It withholds it, or more accurately, it cannot yet produce it, because actual lasting union, rather than a temporary collapse of distance, requires both people to have built the internal architecture that the connection needs in order to sustain itself. Union that arrives before that architecture's build collapses under its own weight, not because the love is not real, because the vessels are not yet built to hold what the love requires of them. The almost reunion showed you the specific gap between where both of you currently are and where both of you need to be, not as punishment, as calibration, as the universe handing you the most accurate measurement available of exactly how much growth stands between you and the thing you are moving toward. When Tedeschi and Calhoun describe the spiritual change domain of post-traumatic growth, they are describing exactly this: the revision of your map of what is operating beneath the surface of events. People who move through rupture into growth do not emerge with the same understanding of the world they carried going in. They emerge with a more accurate one that can account for things the previous map had no room for. The almost reunion has just added precise detail to your map. That detail arrived in a painful way. It is also the truest information you have received in months. Here is where this needs to land in something practical. Understanding what happened is only useful if it changes something in how you move through the days that follow. The first thing is to resist the interpretation that the almost reunion was evidence that it will never happen. This is the mind's most seductive error in the aftermath of a near miss. The door closed, therefore the door cannot open again. But that is not what the mechanism says. The mechanism says the door closed because of what was in the doorway, not because the door itself is permanently shut. And what is in the doorway can move, has been moving, will continue to move in both of you as long as the work continues. The almost reunion did not end the possibility. It clarified what is still standing between you and it. The second thing is to notice what you learned about yourself at the threshold, not what you wish you had done or said, not the version of events you would curate if you could, what you actually did, what your body reached for, what your instincts chose. That information is a gift even when it arrived inside something painful. The version of you who knows what she does at the threshold is more equipped for the next approach than the version who had only imagined it from a distance. The third thing is to give the grief its full space. The almost carries real grief, not the grief of complete loss, which has its own shape and texture. This is the grief of incomplete arrival, the grief of proximity without closure. That grief deserves to be fully felt, not rapidly reframed, not redirected into optimism before it has moved through you. Post-traumatic growth does not shortcut the pain. It moves through the pain into what the pain reveals. The Venus-Pluto trine active right now in the sky is giving you permission to feel the depth without defending against it. That is its function today, not reunion, the capacity to let what is real be fully real without contracting around it. And that capacity, more than almost anything else, is what reunion actually requires from both people. He is feeling something today too. Not the same thing. The Pluto Trine is pulling depth forward in him as well. Something that moved inside him when you were both at the threshold has not returned to where it was. It does not work that way. Once something in you has been reached, even briefly, even at the cost of retreat, the reaching has happened. It is recorded. It changes what is possible the next time the sky opens and both of you are standing near a door. You are closer than you have ever been. That is what the almost means. Not that it failed, that it was real enough to attempt. Not a projection, not a wish. A real approach to a real threshold by two real people who are both, in their own ways, still becoming who they need to be. The rest is growth, and growth rarely announces what it is building,